and say welcome and hello, everyone. I'm very happy to invite you to the Lichtenstein Lecture for August 14th, 2022, made possible by the generous support of Dorothy Lichtenstein. In conjunction with the current exhibition at the Pollock Krasner House, Harold Lehman, the 1930s, Carlos Morales will be discussing the 1936 Siqueiros experimental workshop in which Lehman and Jackson Pollock participated. As a Mexican visual artist living and working in New York, Carlos became deeply curious about the experiences of other Mexican artists who came to this city before him and the legacies they left behind. This talk, which is part of an ongoing project of his, will focus on the Mexican muralist and political activist David Alfaro Siqueiros' days in the United States, especially his time in New York City. Carlos is a photographer and mixed media artist whose work with various organizations dedicated to advancing immigrant rights began in 2000 with the Workplace Project. He contributed photography and testimony to Climate of Fear, Latino Immigrants in Suffolk County, a 2009 report published by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Carlos received the NYCLU's Suffolk Chapter's Equality Award in 2010. His recent projects include serving as director of the Latino Arts Council of Long Island, exhibiting Out of the Pandemic, a video projection and installation at Gallery North, and teaching virtual photography workshops to underprivileged communities in Colombia. I'm going to ask you to hold your questions till the end or put them in the chat. And now I will turn it over to Carlos.
Thank you, Helen. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here today. And as Helen has mentioned, today's talk is going to be about a research paper that I've been working on about Siqueiros' time in New York. And before I start sharing my screen, I would like to briefly talk about who Siqueiros was. For any of you who are not familiar with the work of Siqueiros, he was a Mexican painter and muralist whose work reflected his Marxist ideology. He is known as one of the three great Mexican muralists, along with Jose Clemente Orozco and, of course, Diego Rivera. His communist activities and strong ideals led him to go to prison on several occasions and to live in exile on more than one occasion. He produced thousands of square feet of wall paintings in which numerous social, political, and industrial changes were portrayed from his left-wing perspective. So now I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So the first time I recall seeing a painting by David Alfaro Siqueiros was when I was about 12 years old. I was standing at the Polyforum in Mexico City, which is a cultural center that was designed and decorated by Siqueiros himself during the 1960s. As all of you can see right here, this is the building that I'm referring to. What grabbed my attention the most was actually the structure on which the mural had been created, because to me, it felt as if the painting itself was coming out of the wall. Its dimensionality, proportions, lines, and vibrant colors all made me feel as if I myself could become part of La Marcha de la Humanidad en la Tierra y hacia el Cosmos, which is the name of this mural. And it's also the last Siqueiros mural and the biggest in Latin America. This is the Polyforum. This mural was painted with acrylic paint and airbrush, which is something that Siqueiros had already experimented with prior to this mural and his two murals that he did in California and also Argentina, as well as the two. For this particular mural, he also created several paintings on sheets of metal, which I thought that was quite fascinating when I started reading the history of this mural, because to me, that shows Siqueiros experimented until the very end of his life. He was constantly experimenting, trying to find new methods, new ways to create interesting paintings, and he always experimented on surfaces that were not typically to have been used by other painters. One of the things that I noticed about this mural was the shape of the walls, and as I had mentioned, one thing that he did here that was quite innovative was that he cut these sheets of metal, he painted on them, and then he attached these sheets of metal onto the building. He referred to these pieces of metal as esculpinturas. And to me, these esculpinturas are very important because they stand out the most in the work, since the combination of color gives effects of light and shadows, but it also reflects sunlight, which give the mural quite a powerful feeling when on a sunny day. The two images that you see right here are part of another mural that he did in the interior of this building. And I can say without a doubt for me that this was an early introduction to Siqueiros' work and a very powerful experience. I always remember this moment when I was 12 years old, standing at the bottom of this building, looking up and seeing this huge mural and the colors and the lines. It was just quite powerful. Ironically enough, it was not until many years later that I came upon another Siqueiros paintings. And this is while I was visiting MoMA in New York City. The title of this piece is called Collective Suicide. This painting really resonated with me because I think it speaks to the strong ideals of Siqueiros. After seeing this painting, I became more interested in Siqueiros' work. And once I learned about this workshop he created in 1936 on 14th Street, along with some of his closest friends in Union Square, known as el Laboratorio de Artes Modernas, or more commonly known as the Siqueiros Workshop, my curiosity really grew even more, which led me to do all this research. And just I would like to mention that I'm at the very beginning of my research. I just started working on this paper quite recently, so I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff that I still have to discover. For Siqueiros, revolutionary ideas require revolutionary techniques as well as materials. And to me, this painting is a great example of that. Siqueiros argued that you simply couldn't make work of political art in the modern era using the same techniques that had been used for religious practitioners in the 13th century. One of those revolutionary methods that he used on this particular painting was the use of the spray gun, which was unheard of at the time. Prior to this, as I had mentioned before, during his first visit to the US in 1932, Siqueiros went to Los Angeles or LA to avoid legal issues in Mexico and to explore opportunities in the United States. His initial assignment was at the Cunard School of Art, where he taught a class on fresco painting. This gave him a great opportunity to execute his ideas and continue experimenting with the use of the spray gun and on the two out of the three murals that he created in California. So this was the first mural that he did in California. This mural was commissioned by the Cunard School of Art. And as you can see, you can see him here using the spray gun. This is the first time that I have, that is known of him using the spray gun. He also used different techniques on this mural. Instead of, he incorporated the use of cement in this mural. And I just want to say, this is the other mural that he created, America Tropical, also in California. He created three murals in California. These two murals that I'm talking to, I think it's important to say that they were destroyed after he left the US, after he was expelled from the US due to his political contents. So these are the two murals, and this mural, the second one, which is America Tropical, has been restored. And I believe that this first mural, which is called Meeting Obrero, is still in the process of being restored. It is after being expelled from the United States due to the political views and contents, Siqueiros embarked to Uruguay and then finally Argentina, where he continued experimenting and incorporating new methods in his work. One of those experiments and new tools that he added was the use of projectors. Once he arrived in Argentina, he continued working always on buildings that had very interesting shapes. This is the basement of a newspaper editor in Argentina. And the name of this mural is called Ejercicio Plástico. Here he used innovative methods once again by using the sprinkler as he had done priorly in California, but also the use of industrial paint and the introduction of projectors, which allow him to be able to paint in these surfaces that were completely not square. He also used he used a more projector here, allowing him and his team to study the distortion of the curved surface in a more accurate way. This is a painting that he did in Uruguay. So after Siqueiros was expelled from the United States, he went to Uruguay because that's at the time he was married to this woman who was from Uruguay. So he went to Uruguay, and this is one of the paintings that he created there. This is a painting where he used the use of a spray gun again. He used industrial paintings, and this painting was done on a piece of plywood, which he was just trying to experiment and try to figure out like how by painting on new surfaces he will get different effects. So he's one of the paintings that I think is to me is quite beautiful because of the colors, the textures. And then after that, he embarked to Argentina, and that this is where he when he arrived there, he created this beautiful mural, and which led us to the Siqueiros workshop. As I had mentioned before, this is a research paper that I'm just started working on, so I still have a lot more research to do, and I haven't done a lot of reading and a lot of interviewing people, finding all these sources to get information from, because I realized while I was doing my research that there's a lot of misinformation out there about the Siqueiros workshop, which was really surprising to me, because I read so many different articles with so many versions of the what happened in New York and how he came about creating this workshop, and then I realized there was a lot of information that was completely wrong. So it has taken me a lot of time to get to this point. The use of these materials and techniques he had already been using for some period of time and had given him great results were some of the same techniques that he introduced in New York at the Siqueiros workshop. Siqueiros returned to New York in 1936 when he, along with Jose Clemente Orozco, which is another great muralist, one of the three great muralists, served as an official delegate at la Asamblea Nacional de Productores de Artes Plásticas at the first American Congress in New York. There he gathered to discuss the fight against fascism, and he, as he had done previously in other places, Siqueiros began to immediately organize artists. And this is something that I always find fascinating, because no matter what Siqueiros ended up, one of the things that he was always interested in doing was to organize local artists and then teach them new techniques. And then for him, working in collaboration was extremely important, which is something that I can relate to. Having worked with the painter Harold Lehman, and this is, to me, is quite important. Having worked with the painter Harold Lehman previously in California, Lehman became an important figure among his associates, as well as as the development of the workshop. And this is another thing that I would like to mention that I think is extremely important. When Siqueiros was trying to create a workshop in New York, he was denied access to the space because he was Mexican. And so, according to Lehman, he took it upon himself to sign the lease to be able to gain access to the building, which to me, I found extremely important, because if Lehman wouldn't have done that, the Siqueiros workshop maybe never would have happened. And I think that's something that is extremely important to mention, because in every single paper that I read and book, they never mentioned Lehman. Lehman is not really somebody that's that important. I know he worked with Siqueiros previously in California, and he was close to Siqueiros, but finding that little piece of information to me was crucial, because I think without Lehman, none of this would have happened. A short time after he created this workshop, Siqueiros published what is known as the New York Manifesto, which is a collection of ideas and principles. And as you guys can see here, this is the New York Manifesto. And the methodology of the work in the laboratory was to be based on 6 principles, as he called them, which was experimentation, research of technical aspects of art, studying the relationship between classical and modern techniques of art creation and the corresponding epochs, development of new art production techniques appropriate to modern times, producing public forms of work of art that are understandable and accessible to the general public. And this is something that he always emphasized, like the importance of creating art that was available to the public. And just another thing that I can relate to, working and studying collectively in an environment without hierarchy. The mission of the workshop was to teach anti-fascist artists about radical new methods and materials. This is where he would later meet Jackson Pollock, who was a student of Siqueiros, and where, according to Harold Lehman, a key figure as well as member of the workshop, is where Jackson Pollock adopted the dripping technique, for which he is well known. The workshop was formed by 12 to 15 artists who worked collectively to produce functional art meant to be used of labor and political organizations, including paintings, posters for political rallies, and floats for parades. And you can see some of the work here that was being produced during the workshop. As you can see, all the work that was being produced in the workshop was really large pieces of artwork. And also quite experimental, but also very large in scale. As described by Harold Lehman from the Story of an American Artist, Lehman recruited many American artists, and again, I feel like this is where Lehman becomes a key person in this Siqueiros workshop, because he not only signed the links to gain access to the space, but also he took it upon himself to recruit people. One among them was Jackson Pollock. Lehman recruited many American artists, including Jackson Pollock, while Siqueiros brought artists from Mexico and South America. The purpose was to do experimental, large-scale working using industrial tools and materials. Specifically, not oil, paint, or canvas was to be used. Automotive enamels and lacquers on wood panels was their medium, since experimenting with materials and techniques was such a crucial component of the workshop. It is important to pause and note that the drip technique so commonly associated with Jackson Pollock, who was also a participant of the workshop, was first conceived here. According to the transcript of Lehman's 1997 interview with Stephen Fogarty, which is an interview that Lehman did for the Archives of the American Art, Lehman recalls, and I quote, "We got a full supply of nitro-balls for auto paint and brought them back to the shop. The first thing that we did was to puncture holes. We didn't open them up. We punctured holes in the lid, we punctured holes in the bottom, and all of them. And then we started dribbling the paint onto an 8 by 12 feet pieces of plywood pounds that were on the floor, referring more specifically to dribbling the colors." Lehman continued to explain how and why it happened while confronting the notion that it wasn't an innovation. Siqueiros already had experience of using some of this stuff, and he saw the possibilities throughout the pouring of the paint. Lehman goes on to explain that as the paint dissolved, it will create completely new structural forms, and the paint itself will take shapes that were recognizable, realistic shapes, which is the painting that I had mentioned before here. So this is the painting that is at MoMA, and this is one of the paintings that was created by Siqueiros during that workshop, and where he used all these techniques that I am mentioning right now. So I don't know if any of you have been to MoMA and have seen this piece in person, but I was there this week looking at this painting, and I was looking at it very closely, and I could see some of the techniques that Siqueiros was doing. He was adding pieces he was using a piece of plywood, he was using the spray gun, he was adding the dripping technique, he did several of the things that he, several experiments that he was trying to figure out how things look. And we can go into more detail about the meaning of this painting, but I just wanted to refer back to it for now. So. A minute. For Siqueiros, the modern human being, human being news attitude was shaped by his experiences in the industrialized world, as well as the technical advancements that had revolutionized his reality, believing that all artistic expression should respond to the new mentality that prevailed at the time in the industrialized world. Harold Lehman recalls that as part of this reality, the opportunity to create something completely different and new came about in the float they created for the 1936 May Day Parade in New York City. And this is the float that they had created. And I actually wanted to show you, I was able to find a short clip of this float and moving. And I would like to share that with you. Okay, so this is the float that they created. And here you can actually see the structure moving, which I thought that was quite fascinating. And it's only, I think it's like 5 seconds, but this is a piece of information that I really found quite fascinating, because one of the things that I wanted to do in my research is to not only retrace Siqueiros' steps, but also I wanted to gain access to the first hand to all the things that he did in New York. So when I found this footage, it was really fascinating for me to be able to not just see a picture of the structure, but to actually see it moving, to see how it functioned. So, a minute, hold on. 1 minute, please. Okay. So I was saying, for Siqueiros, the modern human being, new attitude was shaped by his experiences in the industrialized world, as well as the technical advancements that had revolutionized his reality, believing that all artistic expression should respond to a new mentality that prevailed at the time in the industry.
Carlos, we're seeing your text rather than your images.
Wait a minute. Okay. How about now?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. So Harold Lehman recalls that as part of this reality, the opportunity to create something completely different and new came about in the float that they created in 1936, which is the one that I just showed you, for the May Day Parade in New York City, commissioned by the US Communist Party. Siqueiros described the group's first collective production as an essay of monumental sculpture in motion. And as you can see, that this is the result of that. This was the first of several pieces being produced by the workshop. You guys can see here, this is actually them working on the float. And I believe this person here that's standing at the bottom of the image, on the right bottom corner, is Jackson Pollock. Another thing that they did on this piece that I thought it was quite interesting, and I still haven't been able to find images of this, but I read about this, is the fact that Jackson Pollock, along with Siqueiros and the other members of the collective, spray paint onto their hands, and then we're putting handprints all over the float. I haven't been able to find any of those images, so I will continue looking. So this was the first of 7 pieces being produced at the workshop. So this was only one of our 7 pieces that were produced during the workshop. The collective produced additional floats carrying messages with similar motifs to the masses, from the bloody red paint, handprints symbolizing the suffering of the people at the hands of fascism, which was the case in a flood commissioned by the American League Against War and Fascism in 1936. To me, it's quite evident that Siqueiros' workshop was a time when his work became politically functional and even more experimental. After visiting with friends that were on their way to Spain to join the struggle against Franco, Siqueiros was asked to bring the workshop to Spain. So he left New York with several other Mexican artists to do so. Upon his arrival in Spain, it became clear to me that it was not possible for him to recreate what he had done in New York and Spain. So after lecturing in Valencia at the on art as a tool of struggle, the revolutionary presented himself at the 5th Regiment to volunteer as a soldier. And that same month, Siqueiros left New York for Spain. He wrote a letter to his comrades, specifically addressing Jackson Pollock and his brother, as well as Lehman. In this letter, he expressed concern about misunderstanding related to the provision of closing of the workshop, describing himself as being at more unrest with the problems of war and art than ever. In that same letter, he also mentions his upcoming departure from New York. And so that's at the end, and that was the end of the workshop. So this is a letter that Siqueiros wrote to addressing Jackson Pollock, Sandy Pollock, which was Jackson Pollock's brother, and also Harold Lehman. And here he explains, I will say in a very vague way, why he came to the end of the workshop, what the workshop ended. As part of my research, and this is something I didn't mention before, but Siqueiros had already previously come to New York once. And when he came prior to the workshop, he had a show in New York at a place called Delphi Studios. And this is actually the place where that studio was, that gallery was. And this is a cutout from the newspaper. I believe it's from the New York Times saying, the Delphi Studios are devoted entirely on modern sculpture and painting of the American Hispanic school. Orozco and Jose Clemente are represented by this gallery, and so was Siqueiros. So this is a show that he had. And I wanted to mention this because in a lot of the research that I have done, people always ask me how was Siqueiros able to do this workshop so fast, so quickly? How is it possible that so many people supported him to have this workshop? And I think that it's important to mention that Siqueiros had already been to California prior to the workshop, and he also had been to New York once before. So he already had this group of friends that were helping him. Among them Harold Lehman and I forgot the name of the other. But so it's not like he just came to New York and he decided to open up this workshop and then he did it. I think many times that's something that people think, but I always think that it's important to recognize the people that were behind Siqueiros that really helped him to be able to create this workshop. And to me, Harold Lehman is one of those people that were extremely important and key to the creation of this workshop. So, as I had mentioned, I'm in the very early stages of my research, and there's a lot of work still to do. I just wanted to say that in retracing Siqueiros' steps from Mexico to the United States, with Uruguay and Argentina in between, I have moved from my first encounter with him at the Polyforum in Mexico City to his studio in New York. And as a spectator of a different sort, my investigations had led me to an artist who I greatly admire for his dedication to organizing artists, advocating for workers, and his commitment to artistic experimentation. His high risk on all of these levels confirmed his critical role in bringing together art and politics for those of us who seek to produce such work. In following his steps here to New York, I find myself with a renewed impetus to bring life to a previously conceived series documenting immigrants that are both laborers and artists, such as myself. By experimenting further with this method and material, that is to say, the shovel, the hammer, the worker, and the camera will bring together in a new way an ongoing reality of the artista obrero, which is me. And that's all I have for now. I know there's a lot of information here that I would like to include. However, I'm not quite sure that is 100% accurate yet, and that's why I didn't include it. So, Helen?
Well, thank you very much, Carlos. I'm really impressed by the way that you relate to Siqueiros and his type of production, which of course was very distinctly political rather than just a kind of social, a broad social consciousness and community activism. But at the same time, the idea of bringing in others into this collective enterprise seems that you relate very strongly to that. But I was a little bit, I wonder if he really was non-hierarchical. I have a feeling that he was like the boss and the others were his followers, even if it was, not explicitly stated. But it seems to me that he did have a very, very strong personality, that he definitely was the leader, and that the others were, to some extent, his followers. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that he was, I think that he had quite a strong personality, and I think that he always made sure that whatever he said, was done. And I know when we talk about artists from the past, many people tend to romanticize the artists, what they were doing. But Siqueiros was definitely a great artist, but he was also a little bit of a dictator, I will say, because everything had to be done the way he said it, how he said it, and there's plenty of evidence to that. But that's why I wanted to mention the Harold Lehman, because I feel like on many occasions people like Siqueiros and other artists are given all this credit, but we have to really acknowledge that without Lehman, in this case, without him signing that list, the workshop never would have happened. And I think that's a very important piece of information that a lot of times people miss.
Well, clearly he had a support system, or he wouldn't have been able to do what he did. And also, I think it would be interesting to know a little bit more about the symbolism and the meaning of collective suicide, which I understand was based on a true incident where a group of native Mexicans were the conquistadors were coming in to take over, and they decided to kill themselves rather than submit to that invasion. And it also, isn't it, to some extent, a metaphor of the Spanish Civil War?
Yeah, when I encountered this painting, the first thing that I noticed was the Spanish conquistadors here at the bottom of the painting coming over, and then on the other side you can see like all these indigenous people, and then the way I interpret it is like there's a saying in Mexico that goes by saying, I'd rather die than live on my knees for the rest of my life, or que prefiero morir que vivir de rodillas el resto de mi vida. And I think that's what he was trying to say here in this painting, by the indigenous people instead of fighting, turning the weapons against themselves, and killing themselves instead of continuous suffering by the invasion of these people.
Technically, it's so interesting because you've got the different techniques, as you said, the airbrush, you've got this textured kind of impasto, you've got the use of frisquets, which are a kind of stencil, so that instead of having to paint individual conquistadors or individual indigenous people, he was able to duplicate them with a stencil, so that it would be a much quicker way, just with spray paint and a stencil. And then some of the textures, I think he raised up. Isn't there's a kind of a three-dimensional aspect to it as well, with pieces of plywood stuck onto the surface. So it's got a lot of very interesting technical elements.
I always encourage people that if they have the chance to go see this piece in person, because looking at a picture doesn't do any justice to the paint. You know, one of the things you mentioned was the plywood that's overlaid on the painting. So when I was there, I actually looked, these two pieces here is a piece of plywood that has been overlaid on top of the painting. So it's, you know, to give it depth. And I never realized that until I was there at the museum looking at the painting, that I realized, you know.
Yeah, you can only really see it when you're there, because then you can see it from the side and you see how there's the raised up areas. And I think also, I wondered whether or not any of his equipo actually helped him with it, or if this was done entirely on his own.
Yeah, that's something that I've been trying to find out, because I would like to know if this piece was done in collaboration with other artists, or just like his own, you know, creation. It's interesting when I've been doing all this research and I've been trying to find all this information, and for me, it's really important to. I mean, there's so many versions of the workshop, you know, and I feel like a lot of people have written about this event in so many different ways that it's really hard to find accurate information. So I've been very committed to find like, for example, this painting, when it was created, was it really created during the workshop? Because there's a lot of people that have said that it was not created during the workshop, that it was created after the workshop. So I didn't know.
Well, the one that in the photograph of him sitting on the floor with the others around him, you can see the birth of fascism in the background. So that's pretty obvious that that was created there. Not that one above it. Yeah, that one. The birth of fascism is over on the left, where the flag is, right next to that sort of grizzled head. But you don't see collective suicide. I mean, maybe it was there, but we just don't see it.
So some of the work that was being produced in the workshop was this.
Yeah.
You know, so Stop the Work. He also produced, this is a drawing of that I found on Lehman's website of a boat that, another float that we're trying to create, and this was to be displayed in Coney Island. And I don't think this ever happened. I think
no, I don't think so. Pretty ambitious. But I also think that after Siqueiros left New York, that the Artists Union did carry on the workshop for a few months and wanted to make it kind of a permanent fixture of the union program, but that didn't work out, maybe because they couldn't continue the lease on the building, or interest just wasn't there.
Yes, I found an article that said that they did carry on with the workshop. He actually, when he left New York, he was encouraging people to continue with the workshop without him. And, you know, he said that it didn't matter if he was part of the workshop or not. What was important is that everybody continue working collectively. And I know that it went on for a little while after his departure, but then I think it just dismantled, and, you know.
What kind of material is there in the Siqueiros archive in Mexico City, or it's outside Mexico City? Is that studio of his, which I have actually visited,
yes,
that has the interior space that's all geometrically, I've forgotten what polyformed.
Yes, that was his house where he did a lot of his work, his studio, and when he passed away, he donated his house to the public. He wanted to become like a public space. So I do know, I called this place many times to get information about 1936 specifically. And I do know that they have a lot of his drawings that he was working on while he was in New York, a lot of letters. I've been trying to get access to letters to ring material that he produced when he was in New York.
Yeah, I think you need to go there and
Yeah.
get a hold of the original material, because I think he wasn't necessarily the most accurate chronicler of his own history. And so it probably going back to the documents would be very helpful.
Yeah, I just want to share everybody. This is a book that I've been reading. It's written by Phil Einstein. I don't know if you can see it.
Mm-hmm.
He was a close friend of Siqueiros, and he also is the one that wrote this book. I gained a lot of great information from this book. A lot of paper, a lot of materials that didn't know existed. He mentions here, and I've been looking for them. I've been looking for things that he mentions in the book, such as like writings, letters that Siqueiros wrote when he was in New York. There's a lot of images of him and Pollock and what he was showing Pollock the dripping technique, which are images that I've been trying to get a hold of, among many other things. So, yeah.
Now, does anyone else have any questions or comments, or should we have someone put them in the chat, or would you like to just raise your hands? And let me put on the view so I can see other people. Why am I not seeing other people? Gallery, there we go. Okay. Check. No other questions. Then I will thank Carlos very much for this really fascinating talk, and wish you the very best with your research. And then you'll come back and give us another talk when you've got more. But I invite everyone to come next week. We have Greta Berman, who is a scholar of New Deal art, and she will be talking about how Lehman's work, and particularly his murals, actually relate to other artists who were developing humanistic themes at the time. So that will be on the 21st at 5 o'clock, and I hope to see you all then. And in the meanwhile, good night, and thank you again for being with us. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Helen. Bye.